Hi, this is Paul. A quick note before the introduction to this video. Two people canceled for the estuary retreat that's coming up October 17th and 19th at my sister's place in Thompson, Connecticut. So if anybody wants to go, and you can do it super last minute, there are two spots open. I talked to my sister, said, you want to fill them or just leave them empty? And she said, no, go ahead and fill them. So there's two spots left. So if you want in and you can make it, I'll put the link to the website below where you can contact her and sign up and get one of those two spots. So, Olympia, Washington, Northwestuary Conference, day one was tremendous. The people really connected in the estuary groups. There's really a sense that people were serious and involved and committed and open and vulnerable sharing. I played a little bit in yesterday's video, some of the comments from Clara and Karen. I don't think any of us were prepared for day two. That evening after day one, we had a dinner. Nate came to the Airbnb where he was putting us, a bunch of the speakers, up in the Airbnb, and made us a wonderful salmon meal. It was delicious, and there was some rhubarb pie. It was amazing. And I talked to Nate's wife a little bit, and she shared some of that Nate was having some health problems, and she kept it pretty vague, and we talked about that, and I could get the sense that it was serious. But then opening day two, he opened, and so what's following this is the opening. And that just sort of hit a whole bunch of us who know him and love him, and pretty much everyone in the room like a ton of bricks. And he didn't do it for effect. He didn't do it for drama. In many ways, he, I think, would have preferred not to have that attention paid to him. And, a number of us approached him and said, okay, keep us up to date, because it is a serious medical situation. But at the same time, he's a private person. He doesn't have to share it with the world. So it's always hard to know, if you're in one way or another in the public eye, how to deal with these kinds of sensitive situations, because you don't want, it's enough of a burden to be facing this serious medical decision to not have to manage it for everyone else, but yet everyone around you cares for you. And so, again, you see it in churches all the time. It puts people in a real difficult position. And so, obviously, if you're close to Nate, you reach out to him and say a personal word. If you only know him from afar, you pray for him, and maybe send him a note and say, I'm praying for you, and you just keep it simple. But how this impacted the conference, well, and then I'll play Rafe's talk too, which was another, it was just, the second day was just, I still don't quite have the words for it. It was heavy, but not in a purely depressing way, but in a kavod way. Kavod is this Hebrew word which means weighty, and it also means glory. And of course, C.S. Lewis riffs on that with his sermon, The Weight of Glory, that you can find in a lot of different places. So Nate just opens and then reads a very powerful quote and then shares what he shares. And that really set the second day. I remember getting into our estuary group after that opening, and, well, again, people needed to emote and to share, but it also made what happened in the estuary groups very, people, when someone shares something like that and you're in a room like that, people stop playing around. It's in a sense why I'll often say, Weddings are joyful events. I love doing weddings, but funerals are powerful in a different way because when you're facing questions about life and death, well, now we're not going to play around. Now we're going to take things seriously. Now people are going to speak honestly. So, yeah, this was the opening of day 2.
Okay. Looks like most of us have trickled in. So today our speakers are going to be Dr. Michael Martin, Dr. Chris Green, and Rafe Kelly. Let me just say a few words about each of our speakers. Michael Martin, PhD, is a philosopher, poet, musician, songwriter, editor, and biodynamic farmer. He spent 16 years as a Waldorf teacher and as a master teacher, and taught at the university and college level for over 17 years. He began biodynamic farming in 1990 and currently raises dairy goats, bees, and other animals while managing a market garden with his wife and some of his 9 children. His poetry and scholarship have appeared in many journals, and he is the editor of Jesus the Imagination, a journal of spiritual revolution. His books include Submerged Reality, Sophia in Exile, and his most recent work is a volume of poetry entitled Mythologies of the Wild God. He also is a co-host of the Regeneration podcast with his friend Michael Sauter. He runs a hedge school through the Sophiological Institute that has great classes. In fact, there's one coming up that starts next Saturday that is going to be on Sophiology. And I encourage any and all of you to sign up for that course. I'm sure it'll be amazing. I'm going to try to make time for it myself. I've definitely had a little bit of envy, because Sherry was in his last class on Christian romanticism, and I had a little bit of envy there because I didn't quite have time for it. So I'm going to try to make time for this one. And of course, he's also been a frequent contributor on Grail Country. And through our work together, he's become a very good friend. And so I'm very pleased to welcome Michael Martin to speak to you today. Dr. Chris Green. Chris Green is a professor of public theology at Southeastern University, bishop of the Diocese of St. Anthony, and director of the St. Anthony Institute of Theology, Philosophy, and Liturgics, excuse me. He is the author and editor of a number of books, including most recently All Things Beautiful and Aesthetic Christology. That's actually slightly outdated. I got that from Chris's website. His most recent book is actually The Fire and the Cloud, a Biblical Christology, which is part of a trilogy on Christology. All Things Beautiful and Aesthetic Christology was the first book, and I'm eagerly awaiting the third book. I've read both of the first two, and they're excellent. He and his wife, Julie, live in Cleveland, Tennessee, with their sons, Clive and Emery, and their Weimaraner, Augie. Their oldest, Zoe, is currently attending the University of Oklahoma. Boomer? All right. The Fire and the Cloud is yeah. So I discovered Chris I think I first encountered Chris through a little snippet that he had on the YouTube channel Love Unrelenting, which is a YouTube channel that's just dedicated to shorter and longer clips on universalism. And then shortly after that, the algorithm fed me his sermon, God is not a master, which is just extraordinary and one of the most amazing bits of preaching I've ever heard. I just ended up reading his book, All Things Beautiful, and reaching out to him. And he's been on Grail Country several times. And every time I have an encounter with Chris, I just grow to appreciate him more and more. And I'm glad to share him with you today. And I hope you enjoy the talk he has in store for us. Rafe Kelly. Rafe Kelly is a movement specialist. His organization is called Evolve, Move, Play. And Rafe So I'm just going to share, this is kind of how Rafe describes his work on his website, but then I kind of want to give, after that I'm going to go into like what my impression of Rafe is and why he's here today. Rafe says on his website, it says, Evolve Move Play empowers students to make the most ambitious visions of themselves real through practices of movement, mindfulness, nature connection, community. We developed our outdoor movement training program by studying parkour, martial arts, capoeira, gymnastics, dance, and more, by looking at evolutionary science, biomechanics, and ethnography. We learned how people evolved to develop fitness in a range of areas: physical, cognitive, emotional, interpersonal, through play and interaction. And we applied that evolutionary perspective to create and refine our programs. It's how we empower people just like you to move like a human. So I discovered Rafe through John Vervaeke, and I always found Rafe to be open, honest, and thoughtful in conversations. But I never had any idea if I were to talk to him what we would talk about. And then the last conversation that he had with Paul, it just suddenly, it's like a light bulb came on. And I knew, and in that conversation, he was talking to Paul about the importance of roughhouse play. And in listening to that, it's like I knew that what I wanted to talk to him about was the childlikeness of God and the theology of play, specifically as informed by George MacDonald's sermon, Child in the Midst, from Unspoken Sermons. And so I shared this work with Rafe, which was completely alien to him. And he was gracious enough to come on and have a conversation with Sherry and I that was like awkward in the early stages as we were figuring each other out. But I think in the end proved to be a very worthwhile conversation. And I hope it's the first of many to come. And I really respect what Rafe is doing. This is how I see Rafe's work. He's giving grown-ups permission to play again and to be joyfully in the world and in their bodies and free and unburdened in the way God desires for us, to become childlike. And this is kingdom work. This is holy work. Lastly, I give credit to Slicarius for suggesting I invite Rafe. I immediately agreed with that. It made sense on several levels, and it has proven to be a wise decision. Thank you, Rafe, for coming and sharing your vision with us. So those are going to be our speakers today. I have thought a long time about what I wanted to say today, and I think that I decided ultimately that the words that I want to share with you are not my own words. I want to share with you one of my little favorite bits from the writings of Sergei Bulgakov. This is actually from the introduction to his book Jacob's Ladder, which is his book on angels. And the title of the introduction is On a Heavenly Friend. God love created human beings for love. The human heart wants to love and thirsts to be loved. It suffers when it does not love and when it is deprived of love. It wants to expand, to make room in itself, in its own life, for other lives, for many lives, for all lives. Going out of itself, it seeks to melt, to lose itself in the other, to become the other for its own self. To drown in an ocean of universal love, to lose its own soul in order to save it. Such is the law of love as it is shown by the Word who established this law. To discover abundant wealth in spiritual poverty, to live not for oneself, but with all and for all. To become in one's own life the other for one's own self. To become in oneself the not self, in one's own the not own, in emptying oneself to become fulfilled, in humbling oneself to be exalted, to live in love, to become love according to the image of the holy, trihypostatic, and consubstantial, undivided Trinity. Such is the frontier of human nature. Being closed in on oneself, limitedness, self-love, self-desire, and self-worship are unnatural for a human being. That is the lot of sinful, fallen, perverted human nature, and not that of nature's law in its power and glory. For both, as the generic being, Adam and Eve, received a blessing from the Creator to go out of itself for the increase of descendants, and as the sovereign Lord of all creation, capable of loving in its own nature and comprehending in its love, the human being was created by God, a microcosm in a macrocosm, a small world propertied with the ability of turning not to itself but to the other, to humanity and the whole world, and above all and in all to the Lord God. A human being lives only to the degree and by how much it loves, and it dies to the extent by how much it does not love. The one who loves is rich, for one becomes rich in God love. Created after the image of God, who created everything by love, and who embraced everything by love. The human being is called to make room in its own love for everyone and everything. It only begins the first lessons of love before it lies the life of the future age, all of eternity, which can be filled only by love. For there is no life and no eternity in non-love. So, some of you know that recently I was faced with the prospect of my own mortality in a very real and not distant theoretical way, because I mean we all know that we're going to die, but for most of our lives we're able to see that in just sort of a theoretical sense. And I recently had a CT scan that showed that there was a 10.8 centimeter mass on my kidney and some signs of metastases in the lymph system. And so that made this event today super salient for me, because I wanted it as much as possible to reflect my love for you all, because that will not be forgotten. I don't know any more than anyone else what the afterlife is like. I don't have any fear at all of my own demise. I do have concerns for my family and the people who depend on me, but I've had a very close brush with death in my early teens, and I'd gone into respiratory arrest from a very severe asthma attack, and right before it was terrifying, and I was like, it was overcome by fear. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And then at some point, I got past the dying stage and was standing like right at the threshold of death. And the only thing I can tell you is I just had this like overwhelming sense of being loved and knowing that everything would be okay. And so whatever comes after this, I will say this, that the only thing that is forgotten in the imagination and the mind of God are our sins. Every good thing will be remembered always. And so I hope to make this an experience to share with all of you today, to express in the ways that I know how much I appreciate all of you and how happy I am that you're all here today. Thank you. I truly love you all.